All right, number 7 on Joshua Starnes' top 10 movies of 2012 list is Zero Dark 30. Catherine Bigelow directed. Joshua, why is this number 7, and why isn't this higher? I guess that's a better question to ask you.
It's a great movie. I have two problems with it. Number one is that it's an ensemble, but not the best use of an ensemble. It is extremely plot focused. There's almost no characterization at all. The main character, played by Jessica Chastain, that entire performance is created by the actress because she's given nothing about the character from the script to work with, and you don't really know anything about her. You know exactly as much about her at the end of the movie as you do at the beginning of the movie. Even though she's supposed to be the anchor that's tying everything together, you can kind of maybe guess why she's behaving the way she's behaving and why she does what she does and what she thinks about it, but you can only guess. Mainly, they were too focused on, we got to move to this next event, to this next event, to this next event, because it's really almost a police procedural as they track down the evidence that leads to Bin Laden. It's because of that, it's a very plot-focused movie, and it leaves you drifting in the wind a little bit because it's a very, very long film. It's 2.5 hours long. You need at least one character to hang on to, and Chastain does a lot of really good work to get you to that, but she's a little let down by the movie.
Okay, yeah, so that makes sense what you're describing, but at the same time, it's still a brilliant film in many ways.
It's a brilliant film, but there are other films that handle both. You got to be able to handle your characters and your story together really well, and this does a great job with one of those, but not with both. And Bigelow is someone who's clearly shown she knows how to do that, because her last film, The Hurt Locker, was an extremely character-oriented movie that didn't care as much about its plot. And Zero Dark 30 is like the opposite version of The Hurt Locker. It's a very plot-oriented movie that only peripherally cares about its characters.
It's interesting how they're promoting this film, because if I was, say I'm just one of those promoters in Hollywood, whatever, I would really jump on the Osama bin Laden, how we captured him angle, which they're really not doing.
Well, they're focused on the raid. I mean, if you watch the commercials and the trailers, you would be forgiven for thinking that the movie itself was entirely about the raid, and that was it, because that's all they're showing, even though that's only the last 30 minutes. It is by far the best 30 minutes of the movie, and it's probably the best 30 minutes of anything anybody made this year, but it's only one section of a fairly long film, and it takes a while to get there. And to some extent, that's a good thing. The film builds and builds and builds till it gets to its best sequence, and then it ends on its best sequence and just stops, and that's a good thing, but it doesn't really give you always a good idea about what watching the movie is going to be like. And if you think it's just going to be about the raid, you're going to have to wait a long time to get there.
Yeah, okay, I have to talk about this because it happened on the day we're doing the podcast where 3 senators wrote a scathing letter to Sony Pictures, and I don't want to misquote them, so basically they seem to be pissed, but they never really used the word pissed off, but they just basically said in the letter that we believe that this film is grossly inaccurate and misleading in a suggestion that torture resulted in information that led to the location of Osama bin Laden. So basically they're angry that the use of torture was used in this movie to talk about how they got Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, that's a controversy that's been hanging around the movie since it came out, because it definitely shows the torture taking place. I mean, that's how the movie starts. It is focused on every different aspect of the intelligence community and what they were doing to find bin Laden. But it number one, it makes no apologies for the torture taking place. But number two, and I don't know if this was a deliberate choice, an oversight, or what, it does not show the failure aspects of torture. The handful of there are some operations they go on that do fail. They do have setbacks throughout the film, but none of them are related to torture. It might have been because they weren't thinking about it, because they didn't want it to be a political statement movie about torture doesn't work, or because they did, or maybe they were making a political statement movie saying, this is what we had to do, it's what we did, and it worked. But it's definitely pissing off a lot of people, and now they have 3 senators from across the aisle, because you have Carl Levin and John McCain together saying, it didn't work. You shouldn't be putting in segments. And there is one very telling scene in the film after Barack Obama is elected president. He says, he's going to end torture, where you have these analysts who've been part of this program kind of silently looking at each other and you can read into that what you want. It could be them saying, but it seems like it could be one way to read it would be they're like, this is making our job harder. At the same time, you have more than one character who there's an obvious psychological toll taken on them from having to do these acts. So even though they stand by them as people, and that's realistic for who these people were, there is a toll that is being taken on them that they may not necessarily be admitting to themselves. So
yeah, it seems like they were. I guess the best way to say this is that aren't you glad that this movie wasn't like one of your typical Hollywood movies and like sensationalizing the whole thing?
No, yes, I'm very glad.
So shouldn't they be a little bit happy about this? But then I don't know.
I think it depends on the point of view. I think that there are a lot of people, and some of them are the people who've been criticizing it, who feel like if you're not taking the point of view that this is 100% wrong and showing how it didn't work, then you're not doing your job. That's produced a lot of not very good movies like Green Zone. So
yeah.
I'm glad they didn't do that. On the other hand, there is definitely you can definitely make a state a position like the senators have that if you don't show how torture didn't, if you're trying to show about the hunt for Osama bin Laden, and you're showing the use of torture as an essential step in that hunt, which we now know to be factually inaccurate, you cannot market your movie as being the factually accurate chase for bin Laden, because it's not. So there's definitely a way to look at it.
Yeah, but at the same time, your Argo, which is also on the list, is basically a movie that you've mentioned in the podcast that they kind of took liberties, but they don't have a problem with that movie.
Well, they did when it came out. I mean, Affleck himself got a good amount of flack from the Canadian government for underplaying the Canadians' part in it, to the point where he had to actually go back and change his original end card that says what happened to Now is an incident about international cooperation, and Affleck himself had to come out and make several statements to the point of, well, this is only based on a true story, it's not an actual true story, because he did take a little bit of heat from the Canadians. I think he just
but he didn't. What I'm trying to say is that it's like you want it both ways, I guess, right? You want like you want it like a basically honest portrayal, but at the same time you don't want all the honesty, I guess.
Well, the question here, I think,
is what is the honesty?
The question of what is the honest portrayal, because obviously the senators are sitting here saying, if you're showing that they're not protesting that the torture happened, they're protesting that the torture produced solid intelligence that led to the capture or to the killing of Osama bin Laden. They say that is the dishonest part, that you're creating that in order to create a feeling like this was necessary, and that itself is not necessarily honest. That may be a created fiction.
But don't they know that basically this statement actually makes people want to watch the movie more now?
Probably, but nothing like no grandstanding never hurt anyone in politics.
Yeah, good point.